How do? So per your request, we're going to continue with life cycle insights or outtakes, whichever it might be. We'll see how far we can get in the womb to tomb. We were talking just some of the practices that have to do with babies being born, and again, and the viability of the infant, and then the circumcision and brit or brit milah, and the circumciser, and just a number of different things that, and said that circumcision is one of those, excuse the expression, trumping mitzvahs, that, come on in, Lynn, pull up a chair anywhere, right? One of those trumping mitzvahs that, having the circumcision on the 8th day is one of the most important of the mitzvot, and it kind of trumps out or supersedes everything else unless there are medical reasons with the child. And we talked about the viability of the infant. The technical term in the Talmud is viability of the soul, which they used to mark with naming, but naming has taken on a whole other thing in our generation, or our generations, if you will. The Pidyon Haben, the redeeming of the firstborn, we talked about that a little bit. Let me just jump back in with no particular order and whatever, and don't hesitate. Someone has to, keep an eye out. Hi, John. Keep an eye on the screen, because I'm not looking that way. But if somebody does raise a hand or has a question, let me know. Naming, because the question always comes up about naming. Can we name a baby after someone who's alive? Right. That's a tradition, and it is, or the prohibition of doing that is actually very recent in Jewish tradition. Now, Judaism is an old religion, right? With a lot of old customs. So when I say it's very recent, I'm saying that it's only like in the last 300, 400 years. Okay, all right, that's very recent, and it's only in the Ashbai. Bev, you left without my alarm going off. Okay.
I have a dental appointment, guys.
Okay. Hi guys, come on in. Find a seat somewhere. All right. So it's only in the Ashkenazi community, in the European-oriented community or Eastern European community, that they frowned on naming a child after someone who was still alive. In the Sephardic community, it's always been acceptable. Not only acceptable, it's always been not preferable, but it's always been an honor. It's always been an honor. I remember the first time I was introduced to someone from the Ashkenazi community who was a junior.
Oh no!
Right, Rabbi David, who was a junior. Whoa, you don't really have it. He said, yes, and my son will be David the Third. Really? But so it's not a prohibition. It's one of those baba misas. It's one of those superstitions. And naming was very, very important in the Middle Ages, especially. You certainly were identified by your name, but your name connected you much more to the family, to parents, to mother and or to father. And the feeling was, at least in the Ashkenazi community, the feeling was that if your father's name was Shlomo, let's say Solomon, okay, and then if a baby was born and they wanted to name the baby, whether it's in the direct line or a grandchild or a nephew or whatever, they wanted to name the child Shlomo. Well, it's almost like you're wishing that, okay, we no longer need the original Shlomo. Okay? All right, so our family only needs one Shlomo, kind of thing. Therefore, it was seen as kind of a slap in the face to name someone after someone who's already or someone who's still alive, unless of course they wanted to change the reputation of the Shlomo, right? And we want to make sure that Shlomo Stein or whatever, Shlomo Markovitz, that the name had a good reputation out in the community rather than the Shlomo that we wanted to forget about. But naming, there's a whole other bunch of literature and stories and whatever that can go along. One second, Lynn. And but again, you were known. They didn't have last names. They didn't have the family names in that sense. You were known as Shlomo, the son of, or and it could be the mother or the father, whichever. When you were called to the Torah, you were called as the son of, right? But in the community, you could be known as the son of the mother, whichever one had a nicer reputation in the community, or had a more prestigious position, occupation or title, or something like that. You could be. We have lots of references to Shlomo, the son of Rachel the seamstress. Things like that. Yeah, Lynn, what did you want to jump in?
So this power thing, since you're talking about the Middle Ages, is this affected by what they were doing with names of God? There was like a whole powerful superstitious or semi-magical thing
Right.
about names of God, giving someone control of their faith.
Sure. I mean, any name that ends with EL, is adding God's name
Okay.
or God's presence into the name.
Connie is asking you if you can restate the question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Is the microphone on there?
Microphone's on.
The microphone's
Yeah.
on? Okay. So Lynn was just asking about or mentioning that frequently the name of God was added onto a name, so that you'd carry on a closeness or a devoutness, piety among certain families, right?
I was asking a little beyond
Yes,
that
please,
as well, about the power of naming per se. Not only adding God's name, but it seems that Judaism, I don't know, maybe it's typical of other medieval cultures. There's something about naming
Mhm.
that made you feel that the name gave you something.
The name gave you attributes. The name gave you talents.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. It was more. Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Definitely. And when I meet with a couple, for example, it doesn't happen too often in Green Valley when they're expecting a baby. When I meet with a couple and we're talking about naming a child, I said, and they said, well, we'd like to name her after my grandmother Helen. I said, okay. Tell me about what would be the Hebrew for that. I said, all right, well, we can translate Helen, but tell me some of the things about Helen that you remember that were memorable. What were her strengths? What were her talents, hobbies? What were her interests? Something like that. Was she an artist? Was she a musician? Was she a storyteller? Was she a good cook? Something. And we'll see, maybe we can find some kind of a name that really reflects Helen more than just the name. Yeah, very, very, very true. Just a second, Laura. And then the other thing is the belief that, how do I express this? That the name carried not power, this, maybe this is what you were leading up to. Not power, but you had a separate identity. There was your soul, but your soul wasn't known by a name. Okay. If I use the Yiddish phrase, the Malach HaMavis, anybody know what I'm talking about? The Malach HaMavis, that's the angel of death. Okay. All right. Yeah. All right. So sometimes if someone was ill, they would go through a change of name.
Yeah, so.
To fool the Malach HaMavis, right? To make sure that if the angel of death came into the house or into the hospital, wouldn't be able to find the right patient.
Right.
Okay, and would have to leave.
Well, that's why you didn't name somebody after somebody alive, because that would confuse.
It would confuse that,
Confuse
right?
the angel of
Those
death.
kind of things. So there's a lot of literature and stories about those kinds of things. So it's more than just so and so is pregnant, Aunt Helen died 6 months ago, so we're definitely going to name the baby after Helen. And if it's a boy, we'll use an H sound and it'll be Hillel. And if it's a girl, it's something like that. A lot of people just follow that tradition, but Jewish tradition has much more in the history than just that. Laura, did you want to add something?
I just have a funny story that I'll do fast. My mother's name is Joyce. My father's name, they're both was named Robert. And then I had a little brother 13 years later, and they named him Robert Jason. It's like exactly opposite of I mean, it's like and he's really like Orthodox.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
That's his,
They
they said it was different because of the Jason. He wasn't named after my father. I mean, that was the fiction, He wasn't named after my father. He wasn't named after my mother. He just happened.
I mean, there are some in the traditional community who, if there's a name, I'm taking it away from the family name.
Yeah.
If there's a name that is specifically historically identified with Christianity, they will ask the person to change that name. Okay, not everywhere. Not I've been involved with Jews by choice whose names are Christine, things like that. Yeah. So yeah.
This was first.
Oh, yes, Prabha, I was just thinking about when Jacob named his children, where they were also named because the weather,
There's always an explanation.
What that
Okay,
is.
so they named him I choose one. They named him Naphtali.
Yeah.
Okay, because it comes from the word that means to fall. So this one took some kind of a leap or whatever. Right. And right. There's always an understanding of the name or a translation of the name. Right. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was just gonna make the point. What she was saying, is it so much the English name that really matters or the Hebrew name? Because like when I was pregnant with my youngest, we named my oldest after my father's side of the family. So the second one was after Sid's side of the family. And we had two different English names, people. But when we found out the Hebrew name, it ended up being that the person we were going to name after on Sid's side of the family had the same Hebrew name as my mother. So we had to find a totally different name. We found a different relative of Sid's to name her after.
Right. Okay.
But it's because the Hebrew names were the same and it didn't really matter what the English names
Right.
were.
Well, again, but we have to remember that it's really only in the last 200-300 years that we had a Hebrew name and an English name
And actually,
or a French name, or a secular name.
And this is
You know,
probably
right.
a Yiddish name.
Yeah, you sure. Sure,
about that.
sure. Okay, all right. Moving on. So after moving up the chain in life cycle. So let's get to bar mitzvah. All right. Oh, wait a minute. I'm sorry. And I apologize. Some of the people who've been here all day. Which we had, I had a very upsetting phone call early this morning, so I'm only partially here. I wanted to go back and clear up one thing that I said last week, and that was in the conversation about matrilineal and patrilineal descent. Okay, meaning are you Jewish if your mother's Jewish, if your father's Jewish, and what that controversy was. So in the Bible, in the Torah, okay, the mother's role is kind of irrelevant. Sorry, ladies. All right. All right. You're
Try to have.
okay. See, right? Meaning it didn't matter what the status of the woman was. Okay, there are two things that I want to say. Didn't matter what the status of the woman was. If she was Israelite, if she was a Moabite, if she was an Ammonite, if she was a Hittite, if she was Egyptian, that didn't matter. You're Jewish if the father, they didn't use the word Jewish. So you're Hebrew, you're an Israelite if the father was. Not only were you then an Israelite, but which tribe in the days when they still had the tribes until after the temple was destroyed, which tribe you were, what your personal status was, followed the father. All right. So that if your father was a Levi, you're a Levite. If your father was a Kohen, you're a Kohen. If your father was from the tribe of Naphtali or Dan, that's where you were. And if it was a mixed marriage between tribes, it went to the father's tribe. Okay. We'll talk more about, or the husband's tribe. We'll talk more about that a little bit when we get to marriage, marriage issues. If we get to marriage, if we get to marriage issues, we're not even at bar mitzvah yet. Okay. So it started with the status was you're Jewish if the father was Jewish. Then, as we said, when we're not really sure when, or if one rabbi or one person actually said, no, we're changing it, boom, 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 boom. Thus shall it be written, thus shall it be done. And, Yul Brenner, well, he wasn't Jewish, I'm sorry. So it wasn't Yul Brenner, but, that now it's going to be if the mother was Jewish. Because as we said last week, you always know who the mother is. Right? So irrespective of where the father was, because they didn't have to worry about the tribal, Kohen, Levi, Dan, Naphtali, Zebulun, Issachar, to whoever could spell it. Or anything. I know who gets that joke and who doesn't. Issachar is one of the tribes. Okay. Anyway, so you didn't know who the father was, but for the sake of the child being accepted into the community, always being welcome, and not having to stigmatize the mother, then the child was always accepted into the community, even if they didn't know what tribe or status the father was from, or even if the father was not Jewish, right? Always accepted Jewish, and then that lasted for centuries, so much so that even when I asked last week, I said, "Are you Jewish with what?" Oh, because if your mother is Jewish. No. Now, since the 1970s. The official statements in the North American Jewish community and now accepted around the world is slowly changing, right? It's slowly changing so that if a lot of people think, I was trying to explain this a little bit last week and I don't think I did a very good job of it. It slowly changing. It's not that either parent can be Jewish. It's either parent and education and a commitment of the family to participate in Jewish life. So, parentheses, and this is the point that I really wanted to make, that I didn't make last week, or didn't make it clear. So, today's definition, and that's Reformed Conservative Reconstructionist officially, it's not yet Orthodox, but the assumption is that in one way or another, it will become an accepted practice in the Orthodox. Okay, it has to be justified in a little different way, is that if you say, okay, if it's the father who's Jewish, the mother is not Jewish, but the child is given Jewish education, given Jewish life cycle ceremonies, given a bris, given consecration, bar mitzvah, whatever it is, then yes, the practice can be that that child is Jewish. And when you think about it, that's even a stricter requirement, stricter definition than just if mom was Jewish. Because mom may not have been a practicing Jew, just born Jewish. Mom may never have gone into the synagogue, ever. Okay? Mom, technically, according to Jewish law, mom may be a practicing Christian. But according to Jewish law, halakha, once a Jew, always a Jew.
Yeah.
Okay? You can, in Jewish law, you can never really convert away from Judaism. You're still a Jew, even though you may not consider yourself a Jew. So that child technically would still be a Jew, even if he or she never participates, has never even been told that he or she was Jewish. Okay, so our generation's definition or requirement is actually stricter than what the traditional definition was. Now it has to be worked on, it has to be redefined, if you will. And again, and the Orthodox or the traditional have to find the right kind of wording and proof texting and whatever to make that, I use the word kosher, okay, but to make it official and authentic. But that's the direction in which the community goes. And Jen, I'll get to you in a second. And most of you have heard me say this before. Okay, I believe and I teach that you are the ones who make Jewish practice. All right, not the rabbis. The rabbis respond to what the people are deciding and practicing and making resonant and making true for your lives. And then the rabbis come along and say, okay, how do we make that fit within the guidelines and the context, not just of Jewish tradition, but of Jewish law and the literature that we have. One more comment, may I? Okay, all right. One more comment that I didn't get to talk about last week, and that is there ain't no such thing in Judaism as an illegitimate child. And people do not know that. Okay, we talk of, right, this person's a momser, right? Okay, I mean, moms are not in the sense of a bad person, but of an illegitimate child. There ain't no such thing. Okay, a child of a prohibited relationship, okay, whether that's rape, whether that's incest, whether that's intermarriage, whether what adulterous relationship, a child of that is not punished with the status of being illegitimate. Okay, the child, the parents are those who participated in that prohibited encounter might be subject to punishment, but Judaism says you don't blame the child. Okay, therefore, a child of a prohibited relationship is automatically still Jewish. Now, can't be a Kohen or can't be a Levite, all right, but is still a member of the Jewish community, and according to traditional law would have to marry somebody else who came from the same kind of background and status, but most Orthodox rabbis that I know these days don't make that an issue. So again, that's another way that Orthodoxy or traditional Judaism is coming to grips with some of the realities of the 21st century, whatever, of the modern world, and what our Jewish community actually experience, and trying to relate to that. We'll have more to say about that and some other issues, whether it's today or next week. Jeanette, did you want to?
We talked about that applied to boys and girls, that if they had a Jewish education or were somehow involved in the Jewish community, because I adopted one of each, a boy and a girl, and just the fact that they were swimming at the JCC
Right.
in addition to with having to go to
Yeah.
Jewish State
What most people don't know, so here's why we're doing this discussion, this class, if you will. What most people don't know is that the Talmud makes it very clear that if someone comes into our community, now granted we have security issues, but all right, so somebody comes and rings the doorbell and says to whoever's answering the door, I don't know, this is, hi, I'm new to town, I'm Jewish, I want to participate in the life of the community, and well, we have services Friday night, Saturday morning, and that person comes to services and puts on a tallis and participates in the services and whatever. We are entitled to presume that that person is Jewish. He or she doesn't have to show any certificates, any documentation, anything like that. If it's male, we don't have to see signs of circumcision. And we are entitled to presume. Now, granted that that's written at a time when they're all looking at each other and saying, who would want to pretend to be Jewish anyway? Well, we have to remember. That's why I said we didn't teach it that way in Sunday school. All right, but that's a reality with some things of Jewish law and Jewish practice. So it's not that, oh, well, somebody comes and knocks on the door and says, I want to be part, I want to be included, I am Jewish, I da 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 da. We're supposed to, what's one of the first lines in the Passover Haggadah? Let all who want to come celebrate with us, let them all come and celebrate. We didn't have the, we got caught up, got to call the ADL and make sure that it's okay to welcome people in. Who had a hand up with Ricky? I'm sorry.
I'm going to tell you a true story. Okay, most people here know I converted. In fact, today is my anniversary, the 17th of Adar. Anyway, 18 years ago. But I had been attending the conservative synagogue regularly. And one Friday night, the rabbi is like doing his, whatever, and said, can somebody get Sam from the vestibule and bring him in? And everybody's going, and they're counting me. And the rabbi says, now can somebody get Sam? Because I'm not officially not Jewish yet.
Right.
So they couldn't count me, but everybody, all the other 8 assumed, since I had been there regularly, and knew this, that, hey, she must be Jewish. You see?
Right. So let me pick up on that, okay? Because this is another one. Remember when we first started having this conversation, I said there are certain underlying principles or certain underlying, I'll call them insights about Jewish law and Jewish practice that we keep on coming back to. Another one is, let's call it this matter of presumption. Okay, all right. Because if somebody stood up and said, wait a minute, you can't count Ricky, forget the fact that you're a woman, but all right. In a traditional community, Someone in Ricky's camp, all right. Wait a minute, you can't count her. I know that she's not, all right. But the point is not to protect Ricky. The point is to protect the person who made a presumption on behalf of the community. All right, okay. So if someone comes along and says, I'm Jewish, or participates as a Jew, even if they're not, we're entitled to presume, and we wouldn't be punished for having made that assumption.
Well, one person knew that I wasn't.
Okay.
And of course, that was the rabbi who was converting me, so.
Yeah,
So he
yeah, all right.
is the one that.
so let's jump for a minute. I hope this doesn't throw us way off, but if it does, it does. Okay. All right. So, marriage ceremony, that's really a jump from, naming the baby to already we're getting married. Okay. All right. The groom, and we'll talk a little bit about this more, but the couple share a glass of wine, and many of you have gone through this, all right? Okay, so the bride and groom share a glass of wine. Okay, there's a ring or whatever. We'll talk about it. A ring or whatever is used as a symbol of the betrothal is placed. Okay, so the rabbi technically has to hand those things to the groom, not to the bride. Right? In other words, I can't, under the chuppah, I can't hand the Kiddush cup to the bride and say, "Here, take a sip of wine." I have to hand it to the groom, so that the groom hands it to his bride. She takes a sip, he takes a sip, hands it back to me. Why? And it's not that it's being sexist that the male comes first. Okay.
Well, you're not allowed to touch somebody, a woman that's.
I don't have to touch her. Just no. That's not necessarily part of it. Might be linked to it a little bit. Okay. It's this thing of presumption. Okay. If somebody, a bystander, an innocent happens to be walking past, right? And that person doesn't know me, doesn't know the bride, doesn't know the groom. But if that person sees me handing the Kiddush cup to the bride, he or she is entitled to presume that I'm the groom and go out in public and say, "Rabbi's getting married, Rabbi's getting married." Whatever, okay? All right. So a lot of the, let's call it the choreography of some of these traditions and things are written to protect those who might make an incorrect presumption. And that's another one of these underlying things that I would suggest you try to keep in the back of your mind. Oh, maybe that's why they decided to do it this way, to make sure that no one is going to do the assume or presume incorrectly. Chris, then.
Yeah, I'm just curious, Rabbi, in regard of uncleanness of the woman,
Yeah,
that's something else that you will consider too as a rabbi, right?
yes. So where are you going? What's the question?
Well, you're thinking about the Kiddush cup to give to a woman and you don't know if she's clean or not.
Well, she wouldn't be
She
having
wouldn't be getting
she wouldn't be
married.
having her marriage ceremony on a day.
On that day, okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, in that example.
Yeah.
In that example, right.
I'm just musing because a rabbi was a woman and handed the cup to pay.
There you go. Right, yeah, right. But again, when these laws were written, I'll tell you a funny story, another funny story. When these laws were written, there was no such thing as a woman, as a woman rabbi, but. So it'll lead. I love these digressions that, but but you don't need a rabbi in Jewish law for a wedding. Okay? You just need kosher witnesses. All right, you just need kosher witnesses. You need a rabbi according to whether it's the state of Arizona or California or Washington, whatever it might be. All right, but you don't, from Jewish law, you need objective kosher witnesses. Now, can a woman be an objective kosher witness?
Oh, no, you dare go there.
Uh-oh.
I'm in trouble with that one. And this, all right. The halachically, no, but not for the reasoning that people might think. And this is another one. Okay, so I'm back to another one of these underlying issues, insights, if you will, or perspectives. This is me talking. And those who taught me, or who I you wouldn't necessarily find this in a series of books. I can't necessarily quote any particular scholar or group of scholars for it. Okay. So why can't women serve as witnesses? Let me suggest the following type of scenario. Women in Jewish law, the way the role of Jewish women has come down through the centuries. It's come down as women can't do X, Y, and Z, or Aleph, Bet, Gimel, right? Okay. That women are not allowed to do those kinds of things. It's come down through the centuries that way, but that's wrong. I don't mean wrong just morally and just conscientiously. It's wrong in the way that it's being taught. Women in Jewish law, women are not prohibited from doing most of those things. They are exempt from doing most of those things. Okay. And there's a big difference. Okay. All right. They are exempt for a number of reasons, one or two of which we'll mention. Okay. One, and Chris brought up the thing about with purity and impurity. Okay, all right.
They gotta be home with the babies.
Well, that's number two. I was gonna do number one first. Okay. Number one first is that in the presence of flowing blood, that makes anything that you touch, whether male or female, anything that you touch makes it impure. Okay. Therefore, and we've been talking about, this with a Torah scroll and things like that, but any kind of a sacred document or something, if a woman is having her period and she happens to touch the Torah scroll or whatever, or a ketubah, whatever it might be, all right, that would render it impure. Okay. All right. So we're not going to put up this little sign and say, okay, women, if you're having your period, make sure not to touch don't do that. All right. So again, the sense of protecting. And incidentally, that's why the women sit separately. It's not this baloney. Thank you. It's not this baloney of, the women. I mean, it's true that the women are also beautiful, and then the men would be easily tempted from their prayers and whatever. It's women sit separated from, because you're not going to put up a sign and say, okay, everybody, men and women can sit together unless you're having your period, then you got to go upstairs. They're not going to, so they just said for all the women would go upstairs, all the women would sit on this side. You're not going to identify and again, stigmatize kind of thing. The other reality is, like as Ricky said, they didn't want to put women in the position of having to, being pulled in two directions. Okay, so the context is women are exempt from those mitzvot or to participate in those routines and rituals which are time bound, that have to be done at a certain time. Okay, so if the example that they use in the literature is, how And if you've been to Jerusalem, you can actually picture the actual place that someone has to go up and be the guard and the observer at the top of one of the one of the guard towers or whatever in Jerusalem and watch for the new moon, right? And at the first speck of the new moon, they blow the shofar, and so the sound goes all around the Jewish world. Aha, new moon, new moon, new moon, you know, whatever. Okay. And women were saying, well, why can't we be the ones to stand on the tower and see? Well, because if a woman's standing up on the tower and your baby starts crying, you know, which is your first obligation? To go to the baby or to watch for the new moon? Okay, so rather than answering that question, they said, we just won't put the women in that position. All right, so in with any number of, but that's the illustration they use in the literature. But with any of those things that are time bound, women are exempt. Not forbidden, but exempt. And over the years, unfortunately, it became much more strict into women can't do this kind of thing. So that's what happened. Anyway, let's go back. In
Understood, and I'm looking for the words.
which word?
Understood.
Understood. Oh, okay. Barur. That's the word you're looking for from the Hebrew class. Okay, barur. All right. So bar mitzvah. All right. Every time that you encounter bar mitzvah, the term bar mitzvah, let me suggest just substitute the term adult. Okay, adult. All right. Bar mitzvah in the literature and historically, the phrase is much more focused on the mitzvah than it is on the bar. Okay, all right. You know, long before the parties and the receptions, you know, and the DJs and all those kinds of things. Okay, bar mitzvah simply meant that the boy, not the girl, but that the boy had reached the age of adulthood. It was a legal term that as of such and such an age, bless you, to such and such an age, which arbitrarily was 13, doesn't really mean anything. Okay, although there is there's a reference somewhere that 13 is what the number of, was it the constellations or something like that? It was a number like 7, you know, that had certain magical or mystical kind of thing. They could have just as easily picked 15, you know, but 13 was the number. That when you reached age 13, it's not like you had to meet with a tutor or with the rabbi every week for 6 months, you know, or anything like that. It was at that point you were expected to participate fully in the community, however that was defined in your community. And like Ricky was doing with the counting of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, you know, that you could be counted as an adult to make the minyan if you needed 10 adults, 10 males officially, to make a minyan to have a formal worship service rather than informal worship service, which they did. They could do that, but they would change some of the prayers, leave some of them out here and there. But if you needed a minyan, you needed someone at age 13. So they developed this little custom that on the first time that the Torah was being read, which is not just on Saturday morning, it's also a Monday morning or a Thursday morning. Okay. On the first time that the Torah was being read after your 13th birthday, on or after your 13th birthday, in front of the whole community at the synagogue or the little shul, which may have been the size of, you know, like 2 tables, like, you know, we're here. all right, that the boy would be called up. The expectation was that he would know how to at least say the Torah blessings, not necessarily, read or chant a whole portion, whether the Torah, Haftarah, or whatever it was, but that he would be called up to do one of the blessings of the Torah, at which point everybody would yell Mazel Tov. Okay. Oh, we have a new adult member of the community. Great. We now have one more person that we can call if we're short, and everybody would know it. Oh, we can call Joshua now if we need, we need number 10. And that was it. That was it. You didn't have a party. You didn't get a certificate. You didn't get a ballpoint pen. Whatever fountain pen. Whatever it might be. And if you had a wealthy enough family, they provided a little kiddush, some schnapps and herring or whatever after the service to celebrate. But that was it.
When was the first bar mitzvah? Do you know?
Oh, we don't know.
We don't know?
We don't
So
know.
Is there any record of it?
But again, what do you mean by that? You mean with a party?
No, I mean,
And-
the idea of the male when he becomes an adult, going through this little.
Well, we
ritual.
certainly
You
know
how
that they were using the title already by the 4th century.
Oh,
But whether there was any kind of a ceremony
yeah.
or just, like I say, substitute adult, that up until that, at 16, you're eligible for your driver's license.
So back in the days of Moses, they didn't have a bar mitzvah.
No,
So I was
No,
just curious when that
I,
became
I
something.
don't, that probably has with implications from the cultural thing of, age, it's in certain times in the Torah, the closest would be how old you are when you're serving conscripted into the army, which was like 20, but age is relative in those days anyway. But the first time that we encounter the term to mean adult is like in the 4th century, something like that. Okay, and there's no record of there being any kind of a ceremony marking it. It was just an understanding, that's what happened.
Would you say it's tied to like the synagogue culture after the fall of the temple, when you had the study houses became more and more important and we transitioned?
Well, probably in the sense of more participation. Yes, yeah, and then more people were trained, at least in the basics and the rudiments of the quote unquote synagogue worship that was no longer sacrifice based, that was now prayer and study based. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So what happens, and when it gets built up and built up and built up, especially because of cultures that were marking confirmations, first confirmations in the Christian community, sometimes that could be as early as ages 11, 12, 13. There were people who were getting married already, 11, 12, 13 years old. That kind of a thing. But we can't really put our fingers on when did it start being the time of a great, of a great ceremony, other than if you're in those communities that were marking graduation from school at, which would have been the 6th grade, 7th grade, something like that early on. It certainly didn't go on to secondary schools. So it might have been seen as a graduation kind of ceremony. We don't have any record of there being class, like all the bar mitzvah boys coming together, and doing some kind of a celebration. We don't have any record of that early on. But once we get into the 1700s, there is in the literature, there's some of this questioning of why are we, um, why are we titling this, or why are we tying this to the notion of mitzvah, of commandments, okay? Going along with, the themes of emancipation and liberation and independence that are going on all around the world. And what really expectations do we have of 13-year-olds, other than those that want to professionally continue with their Jewish studies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So at some point, certainly there's an emphasis on more study, that and singling out those who did want to participate and have some kind of a recognition of what became called bar mitzvah. In some places they had other names for it. We do have some references to a ceremony called bar Oryan, which is Aramaic for like son of the Torah, kind of thing. Oryan would be Torah in Aramaic. So we have some references to that. When the Reform movement starts in the middle 19th century, there's a frowning upon the whole notion of bar mitzvah for any number of reasons. But the one that they cite the most is because we shouldn't have a ceremony just for boys and not for girls. Okay? So and also, is age 13 really a good marking time, a rite of passage age in the modern era, again, of the 18th, 19th century, in the modern era? So they kind of mixed it in. They said, let's up it, let's base it on education, let's make it available both for boys and girls together. Let's do it like at age 14 or 15, because again, secondary education was coming in a little bit more, so that really tied into a graduation from both public school as well as any kind of religious training, and we're sending them out into their occupations, into their world, whatever it might be, at age 14, 15. Some places they grab the Christian term of confirmation, and it was done as a class confirmation. Many places they tied it together with the festival of Shavuot, which is when we celebrate receiving the Torah, but more importantly, it's at the end of the academic year. Okay, so it's graduation time. So it was easy. It was a much more palatable sale to have that kind of a celebration, and at the end of spring rather than earlier on. The girls were able to participate as well, and people would memorize the 10 Commandments. And they would come up and stand in front of the ark. We used to, at the congregation that I was at in Detroit for many years. It was a very moving moment. Frankly, I'd say that we called it affirmation rather than confirmation. That's a whole other thing. But I found it a very, very meaningful ceremony as a rabbi. And one of the things that we had the students do, we did it in 10th grade, was they stood together and they memorized and recited a pledge about participating in the Jewish community. And they stood we opened up a Holocaust scroll, a Torah scroll that had been saved from Czechoslovakia. And so the kids stood underneath a Torah scroll that represented the Holocaust. And here's a new generation of vibrant, living Jewish. And that was a very meaningful kind of moment. Let me finish up with this. All right. So 1927, almost 100 years ago. No, actually, because they celebrated it. So it can't be 27. It has to be 21, I guess, or 22. Judith Kaplan, who was the daughter of Mordechai Kaplan, the teacher and founder of the Reconstructionist movement. Later on, she marries Ira Eisenstein, so it's Judith Kaplan Eisenstein. She went to her father at age 12 or whatever, and she said, "Hey, Daddy," who was teaching at the Conservative Rabbinic Seminary in New York. And she said, "Daddy, you've taught me, I've studied Torah, I've studied Talmud, with you and whatever. All of my male friends are having this bar mitzvah kind of thing. Why can't I have some kind of a ceremony? And, and whatever. And I'm very proud of being Jewish, and I want to demonstrate what you've taught me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And Mordechai Kaplan, a very strong scholar, said, "Interesting question. Let me think about it." Thought about it, went to the dean of the rabbinic school and said, "I'd like to book the sanctuary for such and such a date for my daughter to become bat mitzvah." And now I'm oversimplifying the story, but obviously, and they said, "There ain't no such thing as a bat mitzvah. What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, there's no reason why there can't be. Okay, I've done all the research. I've done, here is it. She doesn't have to read from the Torah scroll, so we can avoid this thing of tuma, of her touching the Torah scroll specifically. She can read from a book. She can, but why can't we have some kind of a ceremony acknowledging it?" And they said, no, we don't do that. And he said, "Well, no, then I'm not going to teach in your seminary anymore." And so he left Jewish Theological Seminary. And it was one of the important moments in founding the Reconstructionist movement, not the only one, but one of the important moments. And she went on to have the first bat mitzvah that we know of, and I'm not sure where they did it, but they did it. That develops into the Society for the Advancement of Judaism.
It's March 18th, 22.
It was 22. Okay.
So it's 100
So
years.
where did I get the 27 date in there from? Something or other? I don't remember. Okay. All right. Yes.
I'm going to go back over.
Please.
And Rabbi, the beginning, actually, what is the difference, or how is that dedicating your child versus the bat mitzvah? Is it just because of the age? But if you dedicate your child like who was Anna was the woman who brought the child to the temple and left the child there.
Hannah.
Hannah.
Right, okay, yeah.
And then, so what's the difference?
Well, remember we talked about the pidyon of Ben, the redeeming of the child. Okay. So not every parent redeemed the child back.
Okay, you're right.
Some parents said, "Okay, no, we are willing for our child to be dedicated and to live a life of service, that way." So it's not like giving your child to be sacrificed.
No, I never thought of that.
Right.
But that's different because there is a purpose, a higher purpose, perhaps,
To which?
to the service of God versus the bar mitzvah where you're just acknowledging that I am old enough to read in the Torah and do the other stuff. Is that difference?
Well, different generationally.
Oh, okay.
And, and societally, I mean, we don't have I shouldn't say we don't have, it's not exclusively. There certainly are families that would say, no, we are encouraging or forcing our sons to become rabbis and become scholars,
Yeah.
and whatever, that would be the parallel to becoming priests, as it were, in the olden days. But the what I was trying to say is the bar mitzvah historically was as much a celebration for the community, okay, as the recognition. Oh, we have another new person in our midst, another new adult in our midst, kind of thing, rather than the individual or the family actually having this big celebration. because Johnny has reached age 13,
Okay,
it was more of the community saying, okay, here, we welcome you, you know, your blessing the Torah is just as authentic and meaningful of a moment for our community as the rabbi who may be 75 years old is when he blesses the Torah. It's just as valid. It's just as important a moment for our community to see the Torah blessed that way. Does that make
Yes,
sense?
makes sense.
Okay, all right. Somebody else, look, go ahead.
Vignette, my brother is Orthodox and he goes to Monarch Church, Temple, whatever it is in, London. And
They probably don't call it temple, but synagogue, yeah.
but he said that when my son was 13, he's 30 something. He said, I'd like to teach him his,
His parsha, his
basic,
right,
whatever, and whatever he could do. He was LD, so he couldn't
Uh-huh.
do much. And he said that with his temple, which is like the most Orthodox one, I guess, in there, that if you were a 13-year-old boy, they would come out and grab your arm and pull you in there. I mean, if you were a Jewish 13-year-old boy, but
uh-huh,
you know, they knew it, they'd pull you in.
yeah, I mean, I used to have that discussion, I wouldn't call it an argument. I used to have that discussion with my dad. Okay, who said, well, you know, we just couldn't afford it, and you know, and I was one of 5 boys, and when, you know, so I never had a bar mitzvah. I said, Dad, you are a bar mitzvah just by turning 13, whether there was a ceremony or not. And so, you know, you're standing up, and because you can say the blessing word for word back to someone else. You don't have to say it by yourself. You don't have to read it. You can say it, you know, you can recite it back and forth. And that's just as the phrase that I just used a minute ago was not Rabbi Roman coming up with something cutesy. Okay. I mean, it's an authentic halachic statement. Okay. That a 13-year-old boy who recites the words verbatim back to an adult, you know, another adult or whatever, is just as valid as the 70, it doesn't say 75, I'm saying 70, the 75-year-old rabbi of the synagogue saying the blessing. It's exactly the same. So just, you know, bar mitzvah just by virtue of being 13. Is there a difference between education? Is there a difference between, you know, comfort level of the ritual? Sure. Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Okay. So bat mitzvah comes along, and even the most liberal, the reform movements and whatever, now bat mitzvah with an emphasis on the bar, you know, takes more, is more in confirmation or affirmation, has kind of faded into the woodwork. Unfortunately, I personally found it to be a very meaningful kind of thing. But on the other hand, speaking as a rabbi, in a little more than a month, I get to go flying back to Detroit to give a blessing to a bat mitzvah girl. I wasn't able to be, only because I left town, but I wasn't able to be at her 2 older brothers' bar mitzvah ceremonies, but I was at 5 out of her 6 first cousins. I married her parents. I married her aunt and uncle. I married, officiated. I'm not married to. Officiated at two of her first cousins' weddings. I was the rabbi at 3 of her great grandparents' funerals. You know, so the family called like 6, 7 months ago and said, by any chance, would you be willing to come to Detroit? You know, and participate in Addie. I mean, I remember her, you know, she was little, you know, like this. It was the last time I've seen her, when she was like that. So, and then it turns out that the interim rabbi who's been at the temple in West Bloomfield, he's going to be in Israel that Shabbat because his son and daughter-in-law are having a baby, and so he wants to be there for the birth and for the bris. So I get to go back and fill it, and you know, and that's what's nice.
That's good, yeah.
Anyway, okay. Anything else with bar bat mitzvah? Otherwise, we'll move on. We'll move on ahead to marriage stuff.
Bad joke.
Of course.
Okay, you mentioned the ballpoint pen was today the boy would say, today I am a fountain pen.
Right.
And the girl would say, today I am an inkwell.
What do you change?
Not good. Well, I said it wasn't.
Okay, so,
Wisdom comes from the well.
all right, let's do some background conversation about marriage ceremony. And again, and recognizing one of these underlying presumptions, if you will. And that is that historically, again, contrary to what a lot of people would say, that Judaism is male-oriented and that all the laws and practices and traditions were written to glorify the man's role and make, is there a verb from inferioritize or whatever, inferiorate. Yeah, that new word, right. Old practice, new word. There's a lot in the actual, as opposed to the practice, the actual paradigm of Jewish marriage and all that it refers to, that argues against that thought or that accusation that Judaism primarily focuses on the man's role. So I want to make sure that I share some of that insight with you, so you can accept it or reject it or disagree with me, if you will. And I claim a certain amount of expertise and scholarship with this, and that I did my rabbinic thesis on marriage ceremony and where a lot of the stuff came from, and and whatever. So go ahead and challenge me if you want.
I do.
Doesn't mean that I'm right. It just means that I have a lot of the background that I can try to explain. Okay. Again, we have to remember a couple things, and we say it jokingly, but it's true, right? When the laws and the customs for engagement, betrothal, and marriage, when they were written, things were a lot different than they are now. Okay? There was no such thing as dating, no such thing as courtship, right? No such thing as making your own decisions. You hardly knew, bride and groom hardly knew each other, if at all, right? We certainly have records of contract it's not the ketubah, but of contract that's drawn up between groom's side and bride side, when the kids are only 1 or 2 years old. Okay, that the promises are already made. You know, there's the whole matchmaker notion and all of these kinds of things. So, you know, keep those realities in mind when we think of, for example, I'll just jump ahead a little. So there's that first, here's our coffee, here's our Kiddush cup, right? Okay, and I talked about before that I have to hand the Kiddush cup to the groom, right? Got to remember something, that up until probably the last, 100 years, that Kiddush cup underneath the chuppah was the first thing that bride and groom ever shared together. Right? They hadn't gone out dating, they hadn't gone out to dinner, they hadn't been courting, they certainly hadn't lived together. Okay, so here I'm handing them this cup, and that's the first thing symbolically that they're ever going to share together. They're going to drink from the same cup. That had never happened for them. Right? So just use that as an example, and again, keep some of those things in mind. All right, there are, just like there are, to make a distinction, just that as there are with stages of mourning after a death, there's also stages of leading up to marriage. Don't make any judgments between marriage and death. That was not the intention in the way that I brought it up. But there are various stages. Okay, today we would think in terms of dating, okay, and then exclusivity, and then maybe living together, and then engagement, you know, and then a marriage ceremony kind of thing, which might be years and years along, or it might be months. However the couple choose it, and whatever the laws of the particular state, and and the laws as set down by the bride's father. No, anyway, so there are various stages involved. So there are different terms in the Hebrew literature and the Jewish literature. There is the term erusin. Erusin would best be translated as betrothal. Okay. There's nisuin. Nisuin would be the vows. And then there's kiddushin, which is the sanctification. Or if any of you have a Catholic background, the sacrament of marriage officially. So those are the three. There are various subsets along the way also, but those are the most important three. The erusin is the betrothal. The nisuin is the vows, or what we would today refer to as the civil, the civil laws, or the civil ceremony. Okay, the marriage license, and stuff like that. And then the kiddushin is the sanctification, which takes place under the chuppah. Okay, what most people are not aware of or forget is that Jewish law, when it comes to talking about a bride and a groom, and this is one of those that is expressly protective for the bride, is that all of the responsibility for the bride's welfare, clothing, food, other maintenance, and sexual enjoyment. Okay, it all applies already. Well, not the sexual enjoyment part, but it all applies from the erusin, from the betrothal time. Okay, so the example or illustration: God forbid the couple is engaged, betrothed. Those papers have been signed. You know, everybody had everybody has witnessed it, the families are aware of it, whatever. God forbid, the groom is conscripted into the army. The Cossacks take him, whatever it is, and he is missing in action or he dies and whatever. She is protected. Okay, his family is as responsible for her welfare, clothing, food, et cetera, as if he was still alive. Unless she chooses to reject it. Okay, which she can, but she is protected from the time of the betrothal, which may be age 2, maybe years before the ceremony, the marriage ceremony actually would have taken place. So you can kind of figure, why did they feel the need to do that? You know, what was going on in their world when they really felt the need to do that? They recognized what's in the Torah. That's, some of you are aware of this, that's known as levirate marriage. Okay, that if a husband, if he disappeared, if he died, well, no, I shouldn't say disappeared, because they need to have a body. If he died, then her brother, I'm sorry, his brother steps in. She can reject it. It's a very demeaning ceremony in the Bible, but she can reject it, but he automatically marries her or can marry her or has to marry her, whichever way, you know, depending on what she looked like. I guess. What her cooking was like, I don't know. All right. And again, don't forget, we're talking in days of polygamous marriage. So he could have more than one wife. But having said that, okay, they didn't, the early literature, the Talmudic literature going into the 4th, 5th, 6th century doesn't argue against polygamy. But what it does do, again, I'm making this point that I said before, what it does do is says to the man, if you were going to have more than one wife, you have to take care of all of them equally in the manner of their clothing, in the manner of their shelter, and in the manner of et cetera, and in the manner of their sexual enjoyment. Okay, so if you are going to take on that, you know, more than one marriage, you are taking on that extra responsibility also. All right, that's very, very clear. So that's the flip side of the levirate marriage thing, that the brother had to take the second wife. Okay. And then, well, if he rejected it, you know, then the community could come forward against him. And there's, you know, there's all kinds of craziness. But they did recognize, and they tried to make sure that the woman, again, her needs were recognized and responded to. Yeah.
Question on that. I thought that the purpose of the Levite marriage was so that when she had a child, a son, would be as if it were from the first husband, right, from the brother.
There's debate on that.
Okay.
There's debate on that because they couldn't have, in a second marriage like that, they can't have sexual relations for a certain number of months
to be sure she's not
to make sure that she, right, exactly, that she wasn't already pregnant from the previous husband and whatever. But again, what your initial question is true, because the point was to make sure that there was going to be a male heir. You know, right. Yeah.
Is that still current now, Rabbi? I was still going by that.
No, we're not still going by that because we don't have the polygamy
Okay.
situation
Okay.
anymore, where that's mandated. There are Jewish communities that still allow a man to have more than one wife in the Sephardic community, but they can't impose automatically.
No, I was thinking, I was talking more about the brother marrying
Must marry?
Uh-huh.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so.
Is that where the term Uncle Daddy comes from?
Uncle Daddy?
Uncle Daddy?
Well, never heard that.
Never heard of Uncle Daddy.
I made that one up.
Oh, okay. But I've never heard it before.
I have a friend and I used to call him Uncle Daddy.
Uncle Daddy. Oh, okay.
Big jokester from New York.
Got it. Okay,
top Veteran and so.
okay.
I mean,
All right.
I called him
No,
Uncle Daddy.
okay. Yeah, John.
Just real quick, so, even though, let's say the husband dies and.
I'll repeat the question.
The husband dies, the brother's not married. Would the community encourage a marriage of the brother?
Well, in the olden days, it was mandated. It wasn't a matter of encourage or discourage. Right.
In modern times, would this be seen as?
Oh, in modern times,
If
there might be some
married.
there might be some communities that would encourage it. But I don't think there's any community that would force it. I don't think so.
Right.
Encourage, yes. Yeah, especially if he was.
But it wouldn't be seen as a weird thing, as in there are other cultures in the United States would see that as an odd thing to marry the sibling.
I don't know how to answer that. It might more be related to the circumstances of his death, of the first husband's death. I don't know. Yeah. Start maybe too many television shows, Yeah. right? Or movie. Okay, sure then.
So I assume this is, it's an origin in Torah
Yes,
with Tamar and also in Ruth.
yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Okay,
right.
my question is, so is that common in other cultures in the ancient Near East, Middle East?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
I'm just curious.
It is.
Yeah, my guess is it might be in those cultures that were looking, looking to make sure that there was a male heir. So they may have had some kind of a process that would encourage that, but I don't know for certain.
I sort of see it like in the upper levels of society where, like at the royal level, where in the leadership, you want to have a legitimate leader.
Uh-huh,
And so they would marry within the family to say, like, I come from the dynasty or the traditional leadership, but I'm like how it got into normal people is where it seems.
yeah, right.
funny.
I don't know. But on the other hand, if you think back to like the Abraham and Hagar story. So Sarah says to Hagar, I want you to sleep with my husband so that he can have a male heir. She doesn't say, oh, that's abhorrent to me, so that must have been something that was,
She felt it would be her child, like, even though it was her, because it was her servant, that the child will.
well, Sarah or Hagar?
Sarah.
Yeah, Hagar, sure, Sarah felt that way, right.
But isn't that now, I'm gonna go into numbers, Zalapal, I can never pronounce his name right.
So the daughters of
So
Slow.
the daughters,
Uh-huh,
who, there were only females when the father died.
right,
And
Oh,
then
yeah.
they were allowed a portion, of land as if they,
property,
yeah.
property,
So-
until they married. Until they married, once they married, the property goes to their husband's tribe. Yeah, but right, and if they married outside the tribe, the property goes to the new tribe. Yeah, it doesn't say with it, so.
That the relatives of the daughters said, well, we don't want them to be able to marry outside the tribe. It means. our
Doesn't mean that they didn't.
Oh,
Right, no, the question was, I don't remember if they all did or didn't, but the question was that if they did marry outside, what would have happened? And I think it's the Rashi or whatever, the answer is no, the property would have gone to the new, whether sadly or, Frankly, yeah, okay. All right, anyway, so betrothal, the betrothal is, this initial agreement that may have been between the families, or it could be between the couple, but that's stage one. And the word actually comes from it's Hosea. I forget chapter and verse number, but it's Hosea uses that phrase, I betroth you unto me forever. For those of you who may have been here for the renewal of vows thing that we did on Valentine's Day, whatever I used off of that quote. Right. Okay. All right. So, but it's a legal status. Okay. That if you are betrothed, you had the same obligations that would have been imposed upon, especially upon the groom, hold for his family. Okay. Then nisuin would be the equivalent of the civil, that's the vows, if you will. And that's the now what usually we put that in terms of the exchange of a ring or something. Literally, traditionally was just something of value that was given as a deposit, something that the groom owned that was given as a deposit to the bride. Okay. Now it has come down to be a ring. Traditionally, the groom made this vow. All right, the Hebrew is Harayat Mikudesh and leave at the bottom. So you're betrothed to me with this ring, or I promise you, accept you with this ring, according to the laws of Moses and the faith of Israel, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the bride accepts his words. That's the traditional. So frequently, again, some of you may have had this in a ceremony where the bride just said, like, Anila Dodi Vidodi Li, I am my beloved is me, or something like that. Nowadays, in most communities, not necessarily Orthodox, but in most communities, the bride will make a vow back to the groom. It may not be with the exchange with a ring, okay, but she does make an active promise to the groom rather than just accepting his vow. Yeah.
When they have, if the couple chooses just to go to the betrothal and then he dies, will the family still obligated to take care of that woman?
Yes.
Yes.
Even
Yes.
if they didn't go through the vows and the
Yeah.
certification?
She is protected from the time of betrothal.
of betrothal? Okay.
Right.
All
Right. I mean, she can opt out of it.
right.
She can say, no, I don't, I'm gonna go back and live with my family. What if her father will accept her back? That was a whole other story. Yeah. Please, Susan.
Was dowry ever part of the Jewish tradition?
Sure, and dowry would have been some of the terms and the conditions in the original betrothal. Okay, that was what was agreed upon. And then in the second, didn't quite get there, but the second part of the Nisuin time, it's before coming to this is traditionally, historically, before coming to the chuppah. Okay, you would have these vows, as well as signing the ketubah, which would summarize all of the conditions that had been agreed upon, beforehand. All right, which were and different terms if she's, and I don't mean to say this in the wrong way, different terms depending on if she's a virgin or not. But they didn't, the assumption was that all unmarried, single girls were all virgins. That was the assumption. The difference was somebody who was a divorcee or a widow. Okay, so that was a different term when she came to the marriage as a virgin, meaning unmarried previously, or so the phrase is that she comes to the chuppah from the house of her father as opposed to from the house of her previous husband or, something like that. I mean, that's what that meant. But also based on the affluence of the families, what the conditions were going to be, what the terms were going to be, what the dowry would be, what would happen if there was divorce. That's included in the ketubah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, that's included in the ketubah with the understanding that there would be a religious divorce. Okay, there would be a get, et cetera, stuff like that. Did I see a hand out of my left eye? Yes.
Chris, you were.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's me again,
You again?
me again. How do they handle rape? Like on Abraham, Dina,
Not Abraham.
No, I mean, Jacob.
Right, yeah. Okay.
Dina,
In what do you mean? In what?
in the sense of getting married, would she be treated as,
The victim of rape.
right. But,
Well, it's a good question. Usually, how's the dentist? Okay. Again, usually, they were in a position where if the rape was within the community, all right, then they would come up with a legal fiction that there was a marriage. Okay. All right, and then they would follow up on with like I say, a legal fiction of making it seem as if she was divorced, that the community imposed a divorce upon them because he treated her, disrespectfully and stuff like that. So that's how they would, yeah. That's why I say also to normally we think in terms of that whether she was a virgin or not, but that's not the term, the technical term in the ketubah might be virgin, but but they would say that more often it was married previously or not married previously, divorced or widowed or widowed.
That's
Right. Something like that. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But the way that, unfortunately, what would happen, and I have to say this, I don't know of any other way to say it. If she came to the chuppah after having been raped and even just the immediate family knew about that, it's damaged goods.
Yeah.
I hate to say it that way.
Yeah.
Okay, and it would change the terms of the dowry. She wouldn't be blamed, but it would change the terms of the dowry. Yeah, that's the way that they kind of do it. Yeah, John.
I just have an overall sense that the laws and rules are designed to sort of protect the people from the side effects of bad events.
Sure.
Whereas in other cultures, it seems like the rules are set up to punish people who make mistakes.
Very good comment. Very, yeah, very astute. Right. Yeah.
The way a community takes care of itself. One is through nurture,
Right.
and the other is through obedience.
And it's one thing to make the generic overstatement of when such and such happens. It's something else when recognizing that these things did happen in their community. And they could see what was the reaction of some people. And they say, wait a minute, we don't want to do it that way. We want to do it a little bit different. All right, I just want to go 5 more.
Oh, go ahead, finish up. please.
Okay, five
I
more
have
minutes.
mahjong.
Just, excuse me. All right. Priorities. All right. So just in the last, then the third ceremony is what takes place now under the chuppah. It never was under a chuppah. It was always outside. Why outside? Because the blessing of Abraham and Sarah is that you will be blessed. You'll have as many children as the stars of the sky. And how could you talk about stars of the sky if you're inside, right? Okay. Can't, everybody should look up and see the stars of the sky. All right. So everything was outside until they started living in Minsk and Pinsk and Chicago and Detroit and in Minneapolis and whatever and mountain weather and okay. All right. Chuppah. The chuppah, which now we get, get married underneath the chuppah, okay? Chuppah originally, as far back as we can tell, and there were actually two chuppahs, right? One for the bride, one for the groom. It represented the procession that they can, because again, you're coming from different households. They didn't come together in a limousine, right? Okay, they're coming from each other from different households to the wedding. Okay, now it may have been just a covering in case of rain or something. I don't know. But originally, the chuppah was the covering over the bride, over the groom, as they were escorted in the procedure to where the courtyard of the synagogue or wherever the wedding was going to take place. That's the earliest indication that we have. The next indication is that the grooms no longer got a chuppah. The bride got a chuppah. Okay. And sorry to say this, only the virgin bride. Okay. It was one way of giving a special thing to the bride who was a virgin, and that everybody knew it. All right. Until the divorcees or the widows or the may unfortunately have been raped, said, wait a minute, that's not fair to me. It's not my fault, And so then the chuppah wound up being just the procession of the bride, no matter what. Okay. Think of like the Pope or a king or a queen being carried, on a big chair kind of thing. That's where it was. The chuppah was not just the covering. It was the chair, if not even the whole the procession was the chuppah until it came to the time of the ceremony. And then they came up with this idea of no, the chuppah is going to represent their home because they were not going to be moving into their own apartment. They were going to be, if they're lucky, they were going to get their own bedroom in the in-laws' house. If they're lucky, it would have a wall. Okay. More likely it was a little curtain, right? So a lot of the pageantry of the marriage ceremony reflects what I started off by saying. Remember that they didn't know each other. Okay, they may have met prior to the wedding. The first time I met you was on our wedding day, right? Okay, all right. So that chuppah, that covering, represented their first home because they really weren't going to have a first home, or not right away. Because the chuppah is just a little covering over the talus side. The talus side is not, it's not whatever. Okay.
Blocking the view of, you said they married outside because they didn't have blessings as many as the stars.
Yeah.
And now you block the view of the stars.
Because you take the talus. Think of it like the talus. You take it off and you wrap them around. They get wrapped it so that the end for the final blessing. The final blessing that there's nothing over it. There's no overhead.
Up until then,
That's technically. So why does she walk around?
7 times.
Why? Well, 7 is a special number, obviously, but why does she walk around?
She can't decide whether to go. No.
Well, on the one hand, she's checking out her merchandise. Okay, and her mother is holding on. Her mother's holding on. She doesn't walk around by herself. Her mother's holding on to make sure she doesn't run away. Okay, right? He's just standing there. She walks around to check out the merchandise, okay, all right? Now, that's a story. It's probably not true, because how do we know that she did see him before the ceremony started? Think about it for a minute. What's bedecked? What's bedecked? They don't have to sign in the same room. They don't have to be together. They have to sign, they don't have to sign together. What's the bedecked? The veil, right? He puts the veil over her face. Okay, so obviously there was a moment at least when she didn't have a veil down. Okay, and because he puts the veil down, so to make sure that the dad hasn't substituted the other sister, for that kind of thing, Leah, Rachel. All right, but the groom is the one who puts the veil down, and then the parents on both sides use the same phrase of blessing that was given, may you be like the thousands of, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so she did have that, they each had the chance before. So this story about the chief checking out the merchandise really can't be, because they had seen each other. So more likely, okay, she's staking out her territory. More likely, it's a demonstration to all the other women that he's now mine. Yeah, he's mine. He's taken. Okay, that's all right. It's that. So then the different parts of the ceremony, again, that they were sharing a glass of wine, and the ring and the Sheva Brachot, the seven blessings. Which, if he's knowledgeable, the groom recites the 7 blessings. Okay, nowadays that rarely happens, okay, because the cantor or the rabbi likes to show off. All right, but technically it was the groom who would recite those things. Okay, breaking the glass.
Yeah.
All right, we'll end with this. We've gone long enough. But we could go for another 20 minutes, and I could give you all kinds of theories on breaking glass. What have you heard? Why is he breaking glass? Or why do both of them break glasses, or whatever? What does it symbolize?
The destruction of the temple.
Destruction of the temple is one of them. Okay, what's another one? What's another? Oh, come on, you've heard others.
The
Oh,
Well,
Amy said something.
Amy, what have you heard? What?
Oh, she's on.
Amy, you're muted.
Oh, you're muted again.
I
Why the-
heard that whichever, whether it be the bride or the groom who successfully broke the glass, was then declared the head of the household.
I've never heard that one, but okay. Okay, one false step and everything breaks apart. Okay, all right, that the marriage or the love can easily break just as easily as a glass can be smashed or whatever. Any other? Then I'll tell you where it really is. Okay, all right.
Your independence.
Oh, sure, okay, breaking a break from the past. Okay, that can never, everything is gonna be different now. You can't put it all back together again, right?
No one
Okay.
else can drink out of
The
it.
one who.
No one can drink out of it.
Stepped on the glass doesn't get to be head of the household, the other person does.
That's what she.
Yes, that's what she is.
Okay, all right, so here's the truth. Here's the truth. Here's the truth, at least according to my research and what. Okay, so here's our glass. All right. So this is as I said, this is the first thing that they ever shared, right? Okay, all right. It's the first thing they ever shared. Therefore, at the end of the ceremony, we break it so that no one else would ever use the same glass. It's theirs and theirs alone. No one else will ever use that same glass. Until Until along comes Grandma Sophie. Right? Grandma Sophie, who says, wait a minute, but I want to give them the Kiddush cup that they'll use under the chuppah and then use every Shabbos. And then they'll use it on holidays. And then they'll use it at their kids' bris. And, and whatever. And so we wind up having two glasses. The one that they use at the ceremony. And then the one that gets broken at the end. Okay, all right. One has nothing to do with the other in that sense. And to make sure that the other one does still have some meaning, the one that's broken is the custom these days, some of you may have seen it, right? Is that all the pieces are collected and embedded in like lucite or something like that and made into a mezuzah or something to put on their mantelpiece or, or as a memory. And meanwhile, they still have that first Kiddush cup that they can use in Grandma Sophie's memory every Shabbos and whatever. That's what I.
I was just gonna ask, what kind of relationship would that would be with the breaking of the plate at the
The breaking of the plate, that's before.
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
I know that's way.
That's the Tanaim, that
Yes,
goes
I know,
along with
but
the,
that would- But I was wondering, is that with something, I mean, especially with that young, could the kids, the babies or whatever be eating off of that plate? So they actually didn't get to know each other way back when they were in
Maybe.
diapers?
maybe,
Okay.
but I doubt it.
Because I know we did that at my daughter's
Yeah, every once in a while, somebody says, are we gonna do the breaking of the
plate.
breaking of the plate? Breaking of the plate is, is just, that is so that the conditions, because you do it at the Nisiwin,
Betrothal.
right,
Because before my daughter got married, the same day, she had her betrothal. and
Right.
then She had the wedding and I mean, and everything. and
but
then
they do
she
the
was-
plates beforehand, usually before the
beforehand,
ketubah,
before
or
the
right,
ketubah.
yeah, right. The other thing is,
Right?
the thing about with a handkerchief, okay, all right. Okay, not just the dancing of the handkerchief, male, female, but did you do a handkerchief at the ketubah time also?
Not at hers, but yeah, I've seen it.
Okay,
yes.
yeah, is the rabbi or the one who is signing the ketubah, okay? Because holding a handkerchief was because not everybody could sign. Okay, so holding a handkerchief was this, and because the rabbi couldn't shake hands with the woman, right? So take hold of this handkerchief and say, do you accept the terms of the ketubah? Yes, thank you. Hold the handkerchief. Do you accept the terms of the ketubah? Yes, thank you. Put a
No, 'cause my-
handkerchief
my
goes back
daughter-
in my pocket.
Now, my daughter was ruling at the beginning. As
We got two people were talking. No, okay.
Yeah, but, well, I mean, I didn't do, but with my daughter, before the bedecked, okay, we had a party before the wedding. Because,
Right,
and then she was ruling as the queen.
right,
Oh,
right.
yeah, and she was
right.
there and sitting on a
And she
throne.
sits on a special throne.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
it was quite a ceremony before the wedding.
And did the groom, sometimes they will do, and there's names for these and I'm blanking on them. But the groom is supposed to be, and everybody gets drunk. But the groom, the groom is supposed to test his Talmudic knowledge or whatever. He's supposed to ask him all kinds of questions and to keep him preoccupied, so that he's not thinking of it.
Walk around the
And then,
line.
but here's one just to think about. All kidding aside, they were so serious about the making the holiness of the relationship and adding the sanctification, the consecration to this relationship. To say to the bride and the groom that as of this moment, your relationship is different than any other relationship you have with any other human being. Okay. So, yeah, obviously the women would go to the mikveh beforehand and things like that. but they said you treat the day of your marriage as if it's Yom Kippur. Okay? And so
You're supposed to
yeah, you're
fast.
supposed to fast. Okay, they kind of have discouraged that because we, too many of the bridegrooms and whatever were thinking, you know, yeah, whatever. But thematically, that is the way that thematically, you're supposed to look at that day as if it's the holiest day of the year, the holiest day of your existence. Okay, and that it's like you know, what's the Yom Kippur? Like, you know, you close the book of life, the previous life, and you open up a whole new one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, okay.
It's just so exciting.
Great.
I wanna do it.
All right, thanks, everybody. We'll do it again next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, thank you.